Good morning, Dylan with Huntsville Guns. I want to take a moment this morning to cover a topic I've been asked about a couple times recently, online forums, Facebook kind of thing, when talking about gunsmithing, and that's parts guns. Pretty regularly, somebody comes in and they have a firearm that they purchased flea market or garage sale or storage auctions or whatever the case is, and it's clearly damaged or there's something missing and they want to have it repaired and put back in service. And that creates a couple of problems for the gunsmith in finding parts. Not all guns are super common. It's not easy to find parts for something that wasn't made this century or in the century before. And making replacement parts is not always a financially viable option. For example, let's look here. So this is a Hopkins and an Allen revolver. Customer brought in, he bought it at a flea market. It's missing a barrel. It's actually missing part of the lock mechanism. The paw that pushes up on the cylinder is missing. It's missing the mainspring, missing grips. And so this gun is 100 years old, and the ability to find parts to replace what it's missing is slim to none. You're buying a whole gun or a parts gun to find the parts to put that gun back together. Another common one is single shot break action shotguns. These are made by hundreds of different manufacturers over 100 plus years. They're still making single shots now. And parts are not easily interchangeable between all models. And so when you find something that's missing major components like a barrel or a hammer or the latch, it's pretty difficult to find parts for them. And so what I like to do is buy parts guns. I have customers that bring me these guns that are not complete or they're not functional, and I buy them to either restore them and put them back together. Having the ability to make parts for firearms is pretty beneficial, especially when I do it for myself. Then it's basically just a time and materials investment versus doing it for a customer when you're looking at billable hours, machine time at $125 an hour or whatever the case may be. And then I buy them for parts to put on the bench or in stock, or I buy them for parts to sell to other people like myself in the industry. So I had a customer come in this weekend, brought me 2 shotguns, and in that group of 2 shotguns, there are a restore gun and then a parts gun. And so I wanted to cover that this morning to kind of give you an idea of my thought process and what all is involved in that type of transaction. So the first gun is a Winchester model 1200. It's a pump action 12 gauge, kind of in the same family of shotguns as like a Mossberg 500. Cheaper, entry level bird hunting gun made by the hundreds or thousands, mid 60s to late 70s. And then the second gun is a Stevens model 54B. This is a bolt action single shot 410. That is hasn't been in production in probably 50 years. It was made by Savage Stevens. They were kind of what we call like a hardware store gun. Sears and Roebuck, Western Field. These catalog companies would order a big pile of these and then sell them under a house brand name to their customers through a catalog. Pretty common concept. This particular gun, not as common in circulation. And so we'll start with the Winchester because it was the most complete. For the sake of transparency, the customer bought these at a flea market, didn't pay hardly any money for them, and when he found out that it was going to cost more than they were worth to fix them or to put them back into use, he was pretty happy to take the $50 cash offer I gave him for the pair of them. I bought them knowing that one of them most likely was repairable and one of them was most likely just going to be a parts gun. So the Winchester had some pretty blatant issues when it came in. So the magazine spring that runs through the magazine tube was actually sticking into the bottom of the receiver. which would not allow the lifter to function. The action was pretty much locked up because every time you tried to open the action, the spring would be in the way, and it created all kinds of problems. The bolt had some pretty significant corrosion and then some minor pitting on it. The magazine tube had several dents in it, and there was an obstruction. You couldn't really load any shells in it. I took the front cap off, and the magazine spring shot across the shop, so it's missing the magazine retainer, like this one here in the front. The barrel had a stuck choke tube in it, and then, if I can find the light, there's a pretty good bit of damage or finish damage and corrosion on the bottom of the barrel. I would assume that this was somebody's duck hunting gun and it rode in a boat and bounced around and caused some damage to the finish that ultimately led to a little surface rust. A quick look told me that the main parts are here. So the receiver is in decent shape. The barrel is in decent usable condition once it had a little work done. The magazine system was kind of the big, I don't know. And so I bought the guns from the customer, and this morning, while I have some stuff running in the background that I don't have to attend to, I decided to dig into the Winchester, pretty quickly understood what had happened. So these guns, like I said, are primarily bird hunting guns, and so I assume at some point in its life, somebody tried to remove the plug, and when they did so, they took the magazine end cap off of the front of the magazine tube, and in the process managed to damage or destroy or lose the spring retainer. That's a little spring steel clip that goes in and holds the magazine spring in the tube. Obviously the follower was missing because the spring was inside the receiver, and the magazine tube had some dents in it that very much looked like somebody had tried to hold it with maybe like a small bench vise or set of channel locks or something of that nature, trying to, what I assume is, remove all of the parts that were lost or damaged inside the magazine tube. So I get the gun pulled apart. The trigger mechanism is actually in really good shape and perfectly functional. Did a quick functions check of that, and it works great. The barrel cleaned up pretty quickly. I did have to soak that choke tube in a 50-50 mix of acetone and automatic transmission fluid. A little bit of heat, and that soaks into the threads and breaks up that rust that has it stuck. Got the choke tube out without any damage. Cleaned the barrel up and kind of put a little lipstick on the corrosion pig just to make it more presentable. This is never going to be an expensive gun, and so restoring the finish or rebluing isn't really a good option. And it's not a Cerakote candidate in my book, just because it's going to dove hunt or duck hunt or shoot paper or sporting clays or whatever the case is. And whoever is going to ultimately own this, finish, I think, is going to be less a concern than function. So I dig into the magazine system and pull the bolt and the slide mechanism out, and pretty quickly see that the spring retainer is missing. There is no plug in the gun. The spring is in decent shape, but the magazine follower was actually jammed inside of the magazine tube. So I had to make a little tool and was able to knock that out. The receiver end, you can see, it's like somebody, I don't really know how you do this without just being negligent. Either you try to knock it out the receiver end and whatever you're using pushes through the front of the magazine cap. This should be flat across the face. That's what pushes your next shell into the receiver and then up into the loading or on the lifter to be loaded into the chamber. And so somebody knocked the back of it out, trying to get it out of the gun, not realizing it goes out the front of the magazine tube, something of that nature. Once it got stuck, they tried what looks like pliers or a screwdriver or the wrong tool for the job. You can see it's pretty galled up and chewed up. And so I was able to get it out of the gun. I own a pretty good supply of parts. I do this for a living, and so I dug through my parts bin and found some Remington 1100 12 gauge parts. And believe it or not, the spring retainer was a perfect fit for the gun. The polymer follower I had was perfect fit for the gun. Used the dent raising tool that I built a couple of years ago to raise the dents in the magazine tube. put the system back together, and it functions perfectly. There is a little bit, so these guns have a plastic, we'll call it an adapter. It's kind of like a plastic feed ramp that aids when you're loading the gun to get shells into the magazine tube. It had a little bit of damage, and so I had to take some finer grit paper to kind of take all the chew marks out of it from the wrong tool being used. So I get that put back together, and then I go to the bolt. It's hard to tell if I can catch the light. So the bolt has some pitting in it. It's not super bad. It's nothing that affects the safety of it. And so I polished it up real quick and then did a quick engine turn or jeweling on the bolt just to kind of, again, lipstick the pig, make it look a little more presentable. Gave the whole gun a good scrub, cleaned the bore, cleaned out the inside of the magazine tube to remove any debris or burrs that are in there. A little Johnson's paste wax on the wood furniture. Put the gun back together, take it out back, and it functions perfectly. And so in this case, I spent $25 on, if I spent $50 for the pair of them, spent $25 on this gun. I probably got, 2.5, maybe 3 hours worth of billable labor in it. A couple of parts from the parts bin, so call it $35 in parts, 2.5 hours in labor, and $25 in the purchase price. And I have a marketable firearm. Somebody's looking for a duck gun for this season that just opened, or a dove gun for next year, or sporting clays gun, or whatever the case is. I've got a pretty viable little affordable option for that. The second gun is the Stevens 54B. And so this gun is in the same category as all the single shot bolt actions out there. So I think of like a Remington Model 41, Winchester 67, both 22s. So a single shot bolt action where the bolt is the main value in the gun. So if this gun had a bolt and was complete and functional, it's probably a $100, $125 gun. Retail value isn't super high on it, but to replace a bolt probably costs more than the gun itself would as its whole. So I will take this one. The stock has got a little bit of use on it. It's not cracked or chipped or anything like that, but it definitely has shot a few squirrels in its day. And so take the stock off, give it a good little scrubbing, remove all of the trash and debris that's on it, wipe it down with some polish, and send it on down the road. The butt pad that's on it is not original to the gun. It's something that somebody added at some point in its life. It doesn't fit exceedingly well, so it may go with it, it may not. The barrel is pretty dirty. It's got a bunch of, it looks like it hung on the wall in a barn or in somebody's workshop, and it's got a bunch of debris that's just kind of clinging to the finish. And so I'll give it a good scrub, get most of that out, scrub the bore, make sure that it's still serviceable, check the crown on the end of it, which it seems to be perfectly usable, and pull the barrel out of the receiver, $25-$30 to somebody who needs one for a gun that is damaged or needing repair. Same with the trigger setup. It's got a functional trigger and safety selector, and so those parts are worth money to somebody, another $25-$30 in an online auction type of scenario. Like I said, two different approaches to parts guns that come in that aren't serviceable or cost more to repair than the firearm is worth. In the case of the Winchester, take it and clean it up and give it a good scrubbing, repair the damage that's there in my idle time. That's something that is really good to, if your books aren't incredibly full as a gunsmith, if you don't have a bunch of work coming in off of the street, this is a good way to make use of your time and your tools that you've invested in and repair firearms. You make less money on the labor than you would if you were billing it to someone, but you turn a non-functional gun into a functional gun. The FFL gives you the ability to sell that to someone down the road. Like I said, I can give somebody a pretty good deal on this one just because I'm in it cheaply. My biggest expense is labor. And so I can cut somebody a good deal and keep this one back in the woods doing what it was designed to do. With the bolt action, again, completely different approach, selling it for parts. I might find a bolt in some digging. I may sit on this gun for a month or two and do some looking a couple times a week to see if I can find parts to put it back together. But ultimately, unless I just find a screaming good deal on repair parts or replacement parts, excuse me, it'll get parted out and sent down the road. I have a pretty good collection of replacement parts for common guns, pump action 12 gauges, bolt action rifles, AR repair parts, 1911 stuff. And so those are the kind of my bread and butter things that come in, and having something on hand I can do same day turnaround. Those are great. This is something that there's not a lot of money to be made on it, but the customer didn't need it, and the parts are worth more than what I paid for it. Again, I understand that not everybody's going to agree with me giving the guy $50 for 2 firearms, whatever the condition they're in. This is the business that I'm in, and you make your money when you buy things, and I happened to buy these for the right money. Customer shook my hand and was happy for the rest of the day as he walked out the door. I make a little money in parts and in a repair for a shotgun that'll be put back in use. I'd love to hear your opinion on the subject. I said I get asked pretty regularly what I do with parts guns or repair part guns or broken firearms, and this is my approach. I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of guns that'll never get put back to use, but they do have some parts that are still usable. Every time these walk through the door, if I can give $10, $15, $20 for gun and the customer's happy with that transaction, I throw them in a bin. When I get some downtime, I pull them apart, start selling the parts, or put the usable parts that I want to keep into my inventory. And that's how I manage that on my level. Let me know what your opinion is or what your experience has been. Thanks for hanging out this morning. I hope this video format works for you. I'm always open to suggestions, what you'd like to see in the future. If you want to see me take the time to make the parts to fix one of these parts guns and see what goes into that, I'd be happy to consider what that video would look like. Again, thanks for hanging out. Have a great day.